Is it happening?
It's happening. Should we start the episode with it's happening?
We could be starting it with that because this is We Were Gamers, a podcast that Andrew and I record, in theory, weekly, about what we do and how we attempt to find time to even record a podcast.
Don't break the veneer, the shine of it, that it appears weekly in their feed.
It is. That's why I said it. Apparently weekly.
Scheduling's hard sometimes, man.
It's really hard. I would say that, in fact, doing this scheduling stuff is like the hardest part of being an adult. It was way better when you just had like people's parents call each other and you like went over and played with their Nintendo and like ran around in their backyard for 8 hours.
Right. Or you just told your parents like, oh, this person's having a birthday party on this day, and they all worked it out.
Yeah. And then
you didn't have to worry about anything.
I'm going to this, so figure out how to get me there.
Oh, man. Well, logistics is part of being an adult, and we are adults and not gamers.
Aren't logistics a thing, man? I wish they were not.
Oh, boy. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing pretty good, Andrew. How are you?
Good. It was a homeowner's half minute this weekend and worked on more crown molding, and it's a literal living nightmare.
Mm-hmm. It never stops.
Just that doesn't make any sense to me, how you can have wavy everything. No wall from one end to another you could snap a straight line to.
I know. I still have my entryway is not flat. If I open the door all the way, it scrapes at one end, and at the other end, there's like a good fat inch and change when the door is closed. How does that happen?
Tract housing.
Yep.
Right on. Well, that was a summary of my past weekend. Not a ton to report on the house.
Well, I feel your pain. I do not have much to report either. The plants seem to be growing through no fault of my own. I have had nothing to do with them whatsoever.
All right, Homeowner's Minute concluded. I did get out to Wonder Con.
Oh, hey, awesome, Wonder Con.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Cool.
For the 2-ish hours that I was there.
And for the uninitiated, what is WonderCon?
Oh, so WonderCon, how would you describe WonderCon? I would say it's like a smaller comic book convention, like Comic-Con, although no longer smaller, JJ.
I don't know that I've ever actually been to WonderCon, or maybe I've only been once.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's at the Anaheim Convention Center. And the Anaheim Convention Center, for those that have seen maybe the San Diego Convention Center or similar sized ones, is actually larger, and they're adding on to it. And in years past, they would use about half of it. I think BlizzCon now uses the entire thing. They also used to use half of it. WonderCon is now using all of it.
Okay, so they either have a lot of space this year or have a lot more stuff.
The aisles are much wider than at
nice.
Comic-Con. You can walk down them shoulder to shoulder with people. And there aren't the mega booths like at Comic-Con. There's no 12-booth DC, 12-booth Marvel, Mattel taking up half the floor, that sort of stuff.
Right.
It is almost all entirely small vendors. I don't think Marvel even goes to it.
So it's just stores and stuff setting up booths to sell comics?
Stores, artists, comics, anything tertiarily related to being a nerd. I mean, there's like 20 different steampunk outfitters and clothing vendors and small press and clubs and everything.
Okay. And like people selling toys and people selling this kind of action figure and that kind of stuff.
Think large swap meet, but much nicer.
And then extremely specifically focused on that specific kind of nerd and comic and that kind of culture.
Yeah, it's nice because there is definitely a little bit of a TV presence, but there's no mega movie presence at it still, and all that sort of stuff is kind of still stayed away from the New York and Chicago and LA Comic-Con status.
Yeah, that's nice. That sounds like it was a good time.
It was fun going because it's not uber commercialized. You can actually get through most of it in a day, especially if you're not, shopping for tons of things, or you're not looking at every single booth thoroughly. You're just like, oh, that's another toy booth, I'm good. That's another toy booth, I'm good.
Mm-hmm.
In the past, though, you could, the first 2 years that it had moved to Anaheim, you could walk in from the parking structure attached to it on a Sunday. And then 2 years ago, you had to park across the street, but you could park in that lot in under a minute,
Yeah.
This year, it took us about 20 minutes to get into the parking lot on the least crowded day.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Was it at least like a case where like okay, I don't even know what I'm trying to express. That just seems like a lot more. Was it sharing a parking lot with like Disney or something?
Yeah, there's a parking lot across the street with Disney that they use, I think. But, I mean, it's a Disney parking lot. It's built to have tons of cars coming, you'd think.
Yeah, but also like those parking lots for Disney also just take a long time as well. It's not like they are faster than other parking lots.
True.
And there's like, a lot of Disney also gets like a lot of people, right? So you're funneling in with people who aren't all necessarily going to this Comic-Con, or were they? Do you know? Could you tell?
I think that there was probably like 60-40, like WonderCon to Disneyland. Maybe more 70-30 WonderCon to Disneyland.
Okay.
For your reference, there were less food trucks and less lines at the food trucks, so maybe that gives you an idea of how many people were attending.
Sure.
Versus BlizzCon.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, BlizzCon seems like a madhouse every year that we go. So
yeah, and more mad every year, right?
Or at least like mad in different ways every year.
Well, conventions are kind of fun to get out there and pile through. For me, WonderCon is kind of like going through the bargain bin style free for all comics, which is kind of what Comic-Con has become a little bit for me. But this is more accessible in that, and there is actually sometimes a better selection. This year, not so much. I didn't really end up with much of anything except for some comics for the kiddo and one action figure that I had thought about for a while, and they had it there at the Image booth, and that's it.
Wow, really a light year for you. I know you've done a lot of like stuff with artists and stuff there previous years because it seems like it's more accessible there than at Comic-Con as well.
Yeah, definitely. But given that we're overflowing with art here, we've kind of told ourselves to cap it off until we've got everything hung up and decide what we still.
Was that a shared opinion among other WonderCon attendees? Have you spoken to others?
The group we were with, I think everybody enjoyed their time, and a couple people went 2 days, and we kind of all felt like we'd seen it all at the end of Sunday. We only went for about 5 hours, and I felt like we'd seen all of it because we skipped the artists section where you can go flip through everybody's pages.
Sure, and you can spend days there.
Oh yeah, you could spend forever like looking through pages and pages of comics and custom art and sketches and all that stuff, and they had done that. Right. So I think they also felt like they had accomplished everything too because they got to see that as well. The costumes were good, and overall it's a very chill event, even though they're starting to add the tap passes to get in and out,
those things.
Yeah, well, it is the future, I guess.
I don't like this future. Take me back to the past.
It was a bit of precursor, I guess, to Comic-Con because I also didn't have a badge with my specific name on it. It was like a company badge, that I had to get through somebody else's work.
Gotcha.
Anyway, WonderCon, still worth it, I think, for people that want to go see what Comic-Con was like, though, 20 times larger.
Yeah, that's really interesting because I know you have been going to WonderCon for several years now, quite a few, right?
Yeah.
The descriptions from you and other people, like a friend of the show, Ken, and other people, have always been that they seem to like the time they spend at WonderCon a lot more. Not that they don't like this time at Comic-Con also, but it's always felt to me like more got accomplished at WonderCon in terms of like actually getting to meet and talk with people who you're really interested in.
I'd say that my memories are more memorable of Comic-Con, but if I had to do an hour-by-hour analysis of my time on the convention room floor, productivity-wise, in terms of shopping and getting to see a variety of things, WonderCon takes that cake. But if you're talking about overall experience and memories of things and connections that have been made and friends and all that sort of stuff, Comic-Con still comes out ahead. It's just that you don't have to get to the Comic-Con floor and you're not, like the stress of getting through all the people isn't there, and you don't skip half of it because you don't need to see the sci-fi booth a 16th time.
Also, I mean, with Comic-Con, right, at least for you, it's like a vacation because you have to travel, a relatively decent distance, out 2 hours or so. You have to get up a hotel room. We have everyone all around in the same hotel room. It's a big party, right? That kind of stuff. Like if we did something similar for WonderCon, I wonder if the memories would be there also, right?
Oh, that's a good question.
Even though most of you all are local, if we just decided to all hole up in a hotel room for the weekend, right? Would we come up to a similar opinion? I don't know.
It's an interesting theory I'd like to test. I am keeping up with these Hearthstone dailies, and it seems like everyone else, including me, is kind of in a holding pattern waiting for new cards. Yeah,
man. It's the most serious holding pattern I feel like ever. Like I log in, I get the daily quest reward, whatever it is. It was like 50 gold or 100 dust or a free packs of this set or that other set or whatever. And yeah, it's just like, well, I'm not going to bother like inventing a deck or doing anything outside of what's required to complete this quest because I'm just going to end up deleting 3/4 of these decks very soon, and with a whole bunch of new cards.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I even just pre-delete them.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few decks that I like to keep around just for fun's sake. I keep like an old Secret Pally deck around in Wild, and I usually have like a dumb deck that I use for completing quests. But yeah, I'll probably end up deleting most of that stuff because, man, Andrew, I think on the whole, all of the revealed cards for the Journey to Ungoro, I didn't end up seeing too many cards that ended up being the like kind of vanilla pack filler kind of card.
No, I think they gave it a shot at trying to put out interesting cards across the board. A long time ago, I gave them flack for saying that, well, some cards have to be bad. It's like, no.
Yeah.
Some cards may not end up being good because you tried to give them an interesting effect that doesn't seem to, align perfectly with gameplay, but make that be why the card is bad, not just because, you made a 5/1.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And there's, and there are some cards that are boring, all right? There's a card that's a 2/6 taunt for some amount of mana, and that's boring. But it's not bad by itself, right? And there are ways to get that card that aren't even playing that card, and so then you're like, oh, well, I don't mind playing this spell that gives me this other boring card as a result.
Right.
So I'm pretty surprised overall at, I've been sort of taking the temperature out there. People are doing these kinds of, streamers are doing those, what do you call them, where they rate all the cards and try and give you their opinions before things happen or whatever.
Sure.
It's pretty fun to watch those and then later go do the retally and watch them again in 3 months and realize how wrong everyone is. Because man, almost everyone gets something wildly wrong every time, right?
Yeah. Straight up, just straight wrong.
Yeah. Specifically, I'm not trying to put this guy on blast, but the Hearthstone streamer Trump is he's a Asian guy, and he always does these review streams, right? Right before the Mean Streets of Gadgetzan came out, he did one of these streams and said, it's really surprising to me there aren't very many aggressive cards in this set at all. There are almost none.
How did he come to that conclusion with a...
Great question. It has been one of the most aggressive metas that's existed. He looked at Small Time Buccaneer and was like, no big deal. Which is a card that eventually got nerfed. He looked at patches to be like, no one's going to want this. It's just interesting. And that's just one example, right? Every one of those streamers has had cards that they've been completely wrong on.
I thought patches wouldn't be as big a deal, but I definitely saw through Small Time Buccaneer needing a nerf right away.
Yeah, that was just silly. And, so it's interesting to me to watch, right? And, other websites have been collecting like user aggregated data for what cards people think are going to be the most powerful. And, I look at it and I'm like, some of these cards have a variance, right? It's like rate these cards 1 to 5, right? And like 5 being insane and the best, and 1 being like a complete dumpster card. And some cards have like ratings that are even at almost every single level.
Wow.
And it's like no one can agree on whether these cards are good or not.
No, they did a good job, at least right now.
It's interesting, right? Or like, you'll get the bell curve a lot of times, right? Like some people will say 3, most people will say 3, and then you get some 2s and some 4s, and that seems pretty normal. But like you see some cards that are like only 5, only 1, and a couple 2s and 4s, and you're like, whoa. Mm-hmm. People think this card is either the worst or the best, and it's nothing in between. So it's really wacky out there. I think no one knows what to expect. I
think that we're going to hold off on our assessment of what we think of the cards until the episode that comes out on the 19th, which, JJ, will actually be the 50th episode.
Ooh.
Woohoo, a number that is round.
A big, round number.
And we'll have a guest on to discuss how we all think that things are going after that'll be about a week and a half, 2 weeks of the new cards having been in play. Enough time for us to say, I really enjoy playing this, but I have no idea if it's any good.
Yeah, definitely. I really have no idea, because I think this episode goes up the day before it comes out, right? It comes out on Thursday. Yeah. So, yeah, I'm super curious. I don't know, because like I have like 5 ideas for decks in my head, and who knows which ones I'll be able to build based on what cards I get.
I'm really hoping the packs release while I'm in the van traveling.
Oh yeah, that'd be wonderful. You just sit there, like, open pack, open pack, open pack.
That'd be pretty great.
That would be fun.
Interestingly timed this week was a report that I sent you. Well, kind of a report, and I'll get into that in a second, about kind of the state of video gaming as a business. Was quoted, anyway, this report about it, from, what was the name of the gamingindustry.biz was the website that every single article was quoting when they were talking about this.
I believe, gamesindustry.biz is the website, but I believe they are quoting a report published by one of those aggregation or mobile data report from Superdata, which is a company that publishes business data kind of stuff.
Correct. Yeah, they are quoting a report that no one else seems to be reporting. Every single other place that carried this was quoting the biz.biz website, which is a little bit concerning to me.
I think it's a case where this is one of those you have to pay to get this report.
I actually looked into it because no one else was carrying it, and it's a $2,500 cost to get the report.
Yeah, so you can see why maybe someone got this leaked. I'm using you can't see, but I'm using air quotes over here. It was leaked to them, and that's why they're getting a report on it. Like they got a copy somehow, but they're not going to tell you how, because it would cost them $2,500.
Yeah. So give people a rundown of what this guy said.
So it sounds like they're I'm going to just quote this directly. I have the webpage up right here. The research firm concluded that, quote, Hearthstone is killing itself, end quote. And that sounds kind of dire, but they're basically saying year over year and month over month, the revenues aren't growing as fast as they used to be. It's they're down to the lowest number of installations on mobile and stuff like that. It just seems to be like the game is sort of waning in popularity.
Now let's also note that I couldn't tell if the report had done this or the website had done this, but he compared the statistics of FIFA 17 and Battlefield 1 to prove that Hearthstone wasn't as popular as it used to be.
Which are things that seem to be an entirely different monetary and asset and even console.
Yeah, how many people are playing Battlefield 1 on their Android phone?
None, I think. I don't think there's a Battlefield 1 on my Android phone, Andrew, but maybe there is, and I just haven't known all these years.
So aside from the non sequitur game comparisons,
Yeah.
And the fact that Hearthstone was released in 2014 and these were released in 2016, not being a direct comparison either.
These apples to, not even apples to oranges. This is like apples to grapefruits.
Is anyone surprised that on mobile devices their installations are down?
I mean, you would want your installations to be up, in theory, right? More people installing your game.
After 2 years, you're thinking like you're going to be like busting through iOS and Android markets that haven't heard about your game yet?
Right. I can't imagine that the growth numbers are massive for a game that's been out for 3 years now or whatever.
Yeah, 3 years of a game that at this point, arguably, despite their new standard format and all that sort of stuff, all those changes are more about retention than they are about getting new people on the treadmill. Let's really be honest, right?
Totally. I think that, and especially if you look at some of the changes they've made recently with the, going to a all expansion format, right, where everything is going to be packs, so that the meta will vary up more quickly and stuff. That kind of stuff is what keeps people playing the game as opposed to getting new people to start. And new people are in a lot of trouble, man. There's a lot of cards you're going to have to buy by the end of this year.
Right. So, this report, his take on it was then, JJ, that because of all these changes that the players haven't liked, that people are flooding away from the game. I would say that I have been trying to make that point for a while, and you've convinced me that I was wrong.
I would also say that you're not wrong. Well, at least there are definitely a lot of people, anecdotally, that have said, this pirate stuff is just, I can't. And the aggro shaman before that, and just they don't want to be a part of it. And that's the fault of the people that made the game that, let these kinds of powerful decks and cards continue unabated for 6 months plus. That's not, they had the power to change those cards at any time, and they waited 6 months to do it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, it is what it is. And I'm very enthused by what I've seen of this new set. I have the itch to want to play, but I can't. I don't want to play with this pirate stuff anymore, Andrew. I want to play some new stuff.
Yeah, I know, right? Well,
definitely.
I don't know what his motives were to put this stuff out, if it was leaked or whatever. I hope that he was quoting the report directly and that they tried to make these conclusions, but it's very strange to me that the data research firm trying to charge $2,500 a report would be trying to compare statistics between FIFA and Hearthstone.
Yeah, and it could just be this guy's writing is kind of like not quoting things well and is trying to make comparisons or whatever that aren't really there because he needed to make an article.
Right.
Yeah, who knows what the actual data says? Because obviously we can't see it. I'm not paying $2,500.
I'm not interested in knowing that much.
Yeah, that's not going to help my business.
All right. Well, we're both in a Hearthstone holding pattern, so that means you finished a recent game, right?
Yeah. So I have been working my way through Hollow Knight, and I reached one. I reached one of the endings, and then found out that it was an easy way to get a second one of the endings by reloading my save and doing something different. So I saw some endings, and man, Andrew, I have some things to say about that game.
Should we do just a spoiler warning so you can talk about them entirely? Or yeah, let's just do that.
Yeah, let's do that. I'm not gonna spoil the end of the story here, but I want to talk about mechanics, and I want to talk about stuff that is not apparent from when you start the game.
Okay, so
if you want to maintain the mystery and discover everything for yourself, maybe skip forward 5 minutes.
Okay.
Or however long this takes me. I don't know. So that, it's a Metroidvania style game, which we've explained before. You sort of acquire these powers as you go on longer, and one lets you with double jump, and one lets you dash, and one lets you, shoot bolts of lightning and that kind of stuff, right? So by the end of the game, you've collected this whole crazy series of powers, and you can do all this stuff. You can dash in the middle of the air and double jump, and then swing your sword and bounce off it, and then dash again, and all these crazy movement powers. And you get to this place called the White Palace.
Ooh, sounds like it's gonna have the end to that movie that I really like. What's it called? My brain is having Equilibrium.
No, This is not like
No?
Equilibrium.
You're not gonna
No.
you don't fight your way through the tower and
Oh, it would be. There's very little fighting that actually happens in the White Palace, except between your hands, the controller, and you not throwing the controller on the floor.
so mental fighting with yourself.
Yes. The White Palace is it is an area that you get to through a way that you might not think to unless you have done some other stuff in the game. But when you get there, you can't leave until you complete it, or you go back and essentially give up.
Will people be able to find it without you telling them where it's at?
People have found it without being told where it's at, but you'll get to where it is and might not be able to enter it, and then you'll be like, huh, that's weird. And then maybe later you will find a way to do a thing that would allow you to enter that. Does that make any sense? It's kind of, in Metroidvania fashion, you go there, you can't do anything when you get there, but it looks kind of weird, and then you come back later after gaining a new power, and all of a sudden you can do something there.
I feel like we're definitely dancing around stuff and that we shouldn't have done a spoiler warning. But move on.
Well, but the spoiler part is coming up now. When you get inside there, here's what that thing is. It turns this game into freaking Super Meat Boy.
Really?
And it is
Yes!
God, the worst thing. Oh my God, it's so awful.
What's wrong with Super Meat Boy? We like that game.
Super Meat Boy is wonderful, and the game is really fun to play when the controls are as tight and responsive and good as they are in Super Meat Boy. They are not that way in this game.
Oh.
And nothing else, and all Super Meat Boy is that, right?
Right,
You get
sure,
that,
yeah.
Like it's like the you die and you restart instantly. You're back. The levels are very short relatively, and this is one gigantic, super long dungeon filled with blades that spin and things you have to jump over and precision platforming and jumping in a way that exists nowhere else in the game, except for the very secret end boss, which is you need to do this in order to do that. And holy shit, dude, it is just the worst. Oh my God, it's so bad. My mind is boggled. It's a lot of fun to play the rest of the game, but going through this thing was hell. It was so frustrating in so many cases. I had to just rant. It was just so bad. You would get, it's one of the cases where there's like a long hallway, right? And there's like spikes coming up and down out of the hallway.
Okay.
And you have an ability that lets you, sort of you charge it up, and then you just sort of dash forward at full speed until you hit something or you stop it, right?
Okay.
So you have to time it so that this dash, makes it through the hallway before the spikes come out, right? You have exactly like 1 millisecond of a window to release it, and then you'll make it through fine. Otherwise, you'll just be killed instantly.
And then you have to redo how much?
Probably you'll go back like 2 screens before that where you had to jump on a bunch of saws to get up to the platform there where then you make that dash.
Okay, so not all the way back to the beginning, though.
No, there are some checkpoints, and they do use those, thank God. But like it would be a case where like I've gotten to the very top of this room, right? And then there's like, one extra jump. I have to bounce off this and use this enemy as a jumping pad, and then dash in the air over to this other side, do a wall jump, and then I can go up into the ceiling. Oh, I did the jump, but I missed the enemy a little bit. He hit me. I fell all the way back down to the ground. So there's 5 minutes completely wasted, and it's time to start over with like the 4 steps before that. And the enemy's on like a semi-random kind of pattern where it just kind of floats around in a little circle, but he needs to be right at the top of that when you do it. Otherwise, you're not going to get there. It's like, oh my God, there's the worst. It's far and away my least favorite part of that game.
So is it worth it to do this part of the game? For all these people that have now like heard the frustration and know what they're in for, would you still tell them to do it?
So the payoff for doing it is that you then get to fight the like secret last boss or whatever. And he has a bunch more attacks that are like really annoying. Not in that he puts like razors across the screens or whatever, but like spikes will fly around and there's a lot of like dodging stuff all the time while hitting him. The boss I found a lot easier, mostly because the restart time was really low. And you didn't have to like go back in progress a lot of ways. Like the first quote phase of that boss fight, which is the same for everyone, is really easy if you have, done most of the game at that point.
Right, sure.
So then getting to the hard part of the boss fight was always very easy. You could kind of almost just walk forward and mash attack till you won, and then because you get refilled for the second part. And so like that was not so bad, but like just the part about it being like Super Meat Boy wouldn't be so bad if it was the same as Super Meat Boy, where every level was really short and you just had to accomplish this one complicated thing and then you were done. And every time you died, you were instantly back there again. But
and Super Meat Boy was a platformer that you platformed the whole game, and when they introduced new jump speeds or a new jump or a different type of damage that you could end up taking, or that was it that you did for that level, and they made you practice it for like 2 or 3 levels
before combining it with a bunch of other stuff, right? Like the progression was slow. So this game, I wouldn't say that anything they did in that White Palace was something that you had never done before, but it was definitely combined in a way that nothing else in the game was. Just like the sheer rooms of death and craziness in that area are nothing like anything of the rest of that game. And the rest of that game is really fun, and I liked it a lot. But that was not fun at all.
How often does that happen to you in a game, though, that you can look back on it and be like, why did you do this? It's not often that somebody will try something like that.
Yeah, it's pretty rare these days, to be honest. And I actually was like really surprised when I got into that area, and because there's like multiple stages in there, right? And it definitely ramps up in difficulty, but it starts off already pretty hard. Like compared to the amount of like preciseness you need to have in there is a lot higher than you need for the rest of the game. And that's just weird to me, because the game does not require that of you before that.
So it's entirely optional though, right?
Yes, so you can definitely get an ending to the game, or there might even be 2 endings you can get to the game without that. So I don't think it is necessarily a requirement to beat the game. And if you don't care necessarily about the story of the game and you're just playing it for the the controls and the fun exploration stuff,
right?
Then maybe this stuff you don't need to do it at all. And like you're never under obligation to 100% the game, right?
Sure, yeah, no, but a lot of people like to do that sort of thing.
Yeah, I didn't actually even get 100%. I unlocked the ability to see my percentage, and I think I was at like 92.
No.
Yeah, I did a lot more. I thought I honestly would be at like 85. But apparently there wasn't a lot more to do. But after finishing it and reading some stuff, I think I stopped at a good place. It sounded like some of the stuff that was left over was really obscure, annoying, or like really, really long combat trials where it's just like, the combat arena and they just keep throwing guys at you until you win. And that stuff, while good, the combat is good in that game. I don't know that fighting in that way is necessarily the most fun. Yeah,
unless you're in a game that the point of the game is to try and accomplish different feats of like endless level progression. Like, what was the game that we played? Dawn of War 2 had that arena thing where you like, okay, well, we made it to 20 that time, and so we got this extra thing that we can now attach to our characters or whatever. Let's see if we can get to 25.
It's like
or tower defenses.
Yeah, like a horde mode, right? Where it's just like guys will just keep spawning and spawning and spawning until they overwhelm you.
That type of stuff is interesting and fun to see how long you can go if you're getting rewarded for it more than just like, well, if I do this endless mode really well, I get 1 more percentage point for my game. That's weird.
Yeah, exactly. And like, I didn't want to, the final challenge at the Coliseum in the game, I didn't want to spend 20 minutes agonizing over like how to get the right build and everything for it. I just was like,
sure. So you've now finished Hollow Knight then?
Yeah, I really liked it. The ending is really, really bittersweet. There's a lot of it is a sad story, I think.
Tearjerker?
Ultimately is told. Yeah, a little bit, definitely.
Oh.
Yeah. Actually, you reminded me of something, Andrew.
Uh-oh.
I'm about to. So, spoiler warning ends here. Not that anyone is listening, but hey, there you go. You reminded me, Andrew, that there is a Dawn of War 3 coming out very soon.
Yeah, I have not been able to find too much other than a couple gameplay videos. It doesn't seem like it's approaching with much fanfare. I did post a link to one of the trailers a while ago, but that That's been about it. One of the reviews that I've seen of the game said that it took everything from Dawn of War 1 and everything from Dawn of War 2 and found a way to marry those things together, and anything that didn't gel, they kind of dropped.
That's interesting. I really enjoyed our time with Dawn of War 2 back in the day. It was kind of a hero RTS where like it ended up being that you're there was the RTS portion of the game, but the heroes and stuff were the main focus, I think, of it a lot of the cases, right?
Very often, yeah, you'd have like your hero unit. It was story driven. It was kind of like an on rails map, and you led your hero units and sometimes extra squads through these maps, and they couldn't be replenished until after the missions were over. Dawn of War 1 was very much more like the Command and Conquer style, build buildings on a map, make your tanks, make your this, make your that, and send them across the map.
Yeah, so I'm really interested to see how you marry those two concepts in a way that makes the game good.
I think they tried to do it to improve the multiplayer possibilities.
Yeah, and they're definitely, the pictures they showed had Eldar, orcs, and obviously Space Marines. So that's I don't remember Eldar being in the second one, but there were a bunch of expansions to that game I also didn't necessarily play.
There were Eldar bad guys for sure. I don't know about playable. It's interesting that Imperial Guard were not on the top of their list there. Who knows? They always have been, but it's fine. People like Space Marines. It's a good time to like Games Workshop games. Total War Warhammer is getting a second one too.
Yeah, that one was actually more surprising to me because I just assumed they would do all the stuff they said they're doing in this game in the expansions to the first game. But apparently not. This one they said was going to have Lizardmen, Skaven.
Tomb Kings?
I didn't see Tomb Kings, but that doesn't mean you're wrong.
It's kind of like they're going to a bunch of different people, bunch of different races that don't necessarily overlap the realms of men that they were using before.
Yeah. I think like dark elves and some
stuff.
Oh,
dark elves, that was one of them for sure.
Yeah.
I'm okay with it.
Because like they don't live in the same places as the high elves that were in the first thing.
Correct.
So they can't, weird because like, do people want to play a Warhammer game that doesn't have like knights, like men in it? I don't know. I just always assumed that men like Bretonnia were the most popular faction.
I assume
or Chaos, I guess.
They will find some faction of men to put in the game, if not immediately, as DLC. Like they added Bretonnia as DLC to the last game.
They did? They weren't there to start with?
No, I believe Bretonnia was a faction in the game, but not playable at the beginning, and they added them as playable factions later.
Oh, who were the playable ones to start with in the first one?
Empire, Chaos.
Oh, Empire. Oh, okay, that's right. I forget Empire and Bretonnia aren't the same thing.
Right, yeah.
That's me not understanding Warhammer.
Right. I think Wood Elves was in the game, but you couldn't play it until they added it as a patch later.
Right, yeah. And I think that was the same with the dwarves and the vampires, which they added.
Right, yeah. So I'm okay with it being a separate game. I mean, it seems like the first one was such a runaway success. Maybe they deserve the extra money for making it separate and not trying to force it in as an add-on to a game that it probably wouldn't even really fit.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of people really liked that first game also.
Well, I'm hoping we see it go on sale pretty soon with all the DLC, and then we can find out.
Yeah, that would be really cool. And actually, speaking of sales for things, there is a bundle that is ongoing right now as we speak. It is the Humble Black Library bundle of books, like reading materials. For a bunch of the Warhammer 40K Horus Heresy novels.
Oh, cool. Those are, for people that don't know, those would be the fictional backbone to the Space Marine and Imperial stories for Warhammer 40,000.
Correct. So I believe the storyline technically takes place in what would be Warhammer 39K. Because it's like right before the 40th millennium starts or whatever.
Correct.
And it, follows the adventures or misadventures, I suppose, of Horus, who was the emperor of mankind's chosen and favorite son, who eventually fell to the powers of chaos and became the one who attempted to overthrow the emperor, and how all of that played out.
Yeah.
It's not a spoiler. It's not a spoiler alert to tell you that it's well known. Everyone knows that that's where the story ends.
Yeah, they kind of try to leave it as more of a murky story when it comes to people in the 40th millennium,
Right.
understanding 41st millennium. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Understanding what had happened, but it has never been a secret what happened to the reader.
Right. Yeah. The reader knows the state that everything ends up in, and it's just a question of how did exactly all the players get there, and who was involved in what, and who took what side. And they do at least a decent job of explaining all that stuff. And if you are into the fiction of the Warhammer universe, Warhammer 40K universe, they can be fun reads. I don't know if they are well written or not.
Graham McNeil wrote a lot of it. I think Dan Abnett wrote one or two. So those two guys are really, really practiced. They shell out a lot of the back history for those universes to begin with, and then they also write a lot. So those are two pretty good writers. I think there's a few others that filled in one or two of the books, and I can't vouch for those. But those two guys know what they're doing.
And I believe for $15 you get something like 15 or 17 books, as well as some comics and wallpaper and some other stuff. $1 gets you like 5 books, which is really an insane deal if you think about it that way. You can bring them on your Kindle or whatever.
Wow.
And I think $8 gets you like 10 of them, and I think that's the bundle that I went for. So I'll probably like start working my way through those eventually when I finish these Mech Warrior stories that I've been reading.
Oh yeah, we got our second one.
Yeah, I have transferred those to my Kindle, and I've been reading them at night. They're fun.
I've been inundating myself with a couple of different political, not like political stories, but like numerical political things. Like here's statistics of this stuff, here's statistics of that stuff type books. So I need to get out of that and start reading more fiction because my brain hurts.
The Mech Warrior stuff is extremely light, and or at least like light in terms of it is a not necessarily lighthearted, but it is a light reading kind of fiction story that you can just let happen to you, and you don't have to think deeply about everyone's motives. So far, anyway.
Yeah, research papers in book length are not as fun to read as I thought they would be.
Okay. Yeah, that's. I think I would have assumed that one, but hey, I'm glad you went out and did the reading.
I tried.
That's good.
I tried.
That's good.
Speaking of research papers, this kind of fits a little bit. The Economist is one of those magazine website conglomeration things that attempts to be researchy and deep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they do print some good stuff.
They had an article, JJ, that inflamed my passions when I read the quick summary of it and people's impressions of what it said, and forced me to read it, beginning from an angry space.
Would you say that this title is clickbait?
It certainly is a little bit of clickbait, and one of the descriptions I've seen of it was, what's the title? Read the title, so people, and then I'll tell you what the thing was.
The title of this kind of, I guess I would call this a executive summary of a longer article. The title is "The Link Between Video Games and Unemployment," and the little subtitle is "As People Struggle to Find Decent Jobs, Video Games Fill the Void." The
longer form article was called "Escape to Another World," as video games get better and jobs prospects get worse, young men are dropping out of the job market to spend their time in alternate reality. Okay. And the thing that hooked me and got me angry before I read it was somebody saying, I'm going to paraphrase because I can't find the tweet right now, but are leisure worlds essentially removing young men from the workforce? And then another one said, do video game players without clear sets of goals, like in their games, find it hard to assimilate into the workforce? And those seem like stupid things to be saying. None of those are anything to do with, even the titles don't have anything to do with the conclusions of this article or what it's about. Yeah, both of the articles, right? The titles are somewhat sensationalist,
And you get to the end, and the article has concluded, well, it seems like these young men, and the articles are really about specifically men for whatever reason, if that's what the research was on, I guess, that feel like they are underemployed or unemployed, right? Like they would want to work more, it seemed to be the conclusions, but because they can't, they spend their time playing video games. And that conclusion is not a sexy headline.
No, it's not.
Bored man plays video game, news at 11.
It's an Onion article.
Right? Like,
let's do our own little quick executive summary of it. This writer, Ryan Event, has said essentially a lot of unemployment hit the country. And he couches it in a way where he says from 2000 to 2015, men coming out of college dropped from 82% to 72% employment immediately in college jobs or whatever. College jobs that required college degrees or education of that level.
Right.
What else happened from 2000 to 2015?
There was a huge recession there, Andrew.
You mean it doesn't have anything to do with
the
the fact that video games grew from $50 to $100 billion industry, and that's probably why they're not employed?
Oh, wait, no. He doesn't mention the recession in this article at all?
No, he doesn't.
Gosh, that sure seems like a mistake.
Instead, he mentions that it's a $100 billion industry, and it's growing every year, and that the games are, I think he said, have an engrossing nature, and that's worrisome for getting people out of the house and into the workforce.
And that the engrossing nature of them is increasing, and this is a bad thing for some reason.
Have you ever read a book that you couldn't put down, or like watched television? Like
this seems like
kids these days.
I know this article seems a little bit like old man shaking shaking his fist at the sun, be like, "Darn you, kids!" And like that even isn't even necessarily where he ends up at the end of the article. The end of the article, he ends up saying like, "Yeah, I think it seems like after interviewing a lot of them, they all seem to say." Yeah, I wouldn't. If I was working, I wouldn't have time for all these video games, and that would be fine.
Right.
And then it's like, so they'd happy to work more, but they can't.
Yeah.
So
the longer article has a lot of interviews with people that like, oh, this guy plays Destiny 8 hours a day. Well, what's his job? Well, he could only get a job during 2008 as a grocery bagger for 4 hours a day.
And so what does he do with the other 8 hours of day during the day?
So he can't find a job. He looked for 6 months, and he's working as a grocery bagger for 4 hours a day. Yeah, he plays a little Destiny to blow off steam.
Because, what else does he do? Oh, no, he's single, and he lives at his parents' home because he's only a grocery bagger for 4 hours a day and can't afford to do anything else. I'm sure he doesn't enjoy living with his parents.
Yeah. It was a weird turn. I was like angry when I started reading it because of the clickbait titles and clickbait like descriptions of the article, especially for something coming from The Economist. Why are we starting there?
Yeah, and I wonder if you had gotten to this article without having heard about it on Twitter or something through some inflammatory means.
No, of course not.
If we would even be having this discussion in this way, right?
Yeah, and then of course we start reading it, and I'm reading these statistics that are not. That he's trying to apply to video games, and I'm just getting angrier and angrier. And he's talking about the leisure mentality of video games. I'm getting angry, and then with no preemption in either the long or short form, it's kind of like, yeah, but it's not really their fault. Job prospects suck,
and it's not just them that are having a bad trouble. Everyone is, man. Darn.
Yeah,
and that's the end. What? It's really confusing.
It's important if you're going to write articles and things that supposedly doing deep dives into worlds, maybe look into some more stats or
it is really deep. He definitely dives a lot, but then he at the end of the article reverses course on the rest of the article and just throws all the writing he just did under the bus.
He's like, well, I can't possibly come out against video games, so.
If you want to have an inflammatory article, write an inflammatory article. If you don't, then write something sensible.
Yes.
Don't try to straddle the line.
I know this isn't a scientific way to do this, but start with your conclusion and work from there. You're a writer.
Whoa, dude, come on. Don't encourage writing skills here. This is the internet.
He's trying to make a point, right? Like, start with your point and then try and find stuff that supports your point. You don't have to use the scientific method.
Yeah. Anyway, the article is interesting if you approach it from a level-headed perspective, and it definitely is a problem. Like, a lot of people have the issue of not being able to work as much as they want, and the job prospects are definitely declining for everyone. It's not just them. And it's not just men, and it's not just this age range, right? It's a national and across the board phenomenon. So, that's not here or there, but an interesting slice of life, as long as you sort of take it only as that.
If it wasn't owned by Bob Dylan, this is where I'd kind of fade in. The times they are changing and just lead us out.
Yeah, man.
But I don't want to get
too
sued.
bad. We would get sued a lot. And besides, Andrew, we need people to know how they can contact us.
Yeah, if you want to get me in a state where I could possibly have a heart attack from how angry I am about articles like this, where would you do that?
I think you could send an email to podcast@weweregamers.com, which is an email address that we look at usually. And then you could reach out to us on our Facebook page, which is We Were Gamers, and write us a finely crafted meme tweet, and send it to We Were Gamers, and then link us to all these hot articles that make us rage.
Oh man, I think we should come back next week with some advice on people how to get a VPN before it's too late.
Yeah. Yeah, man, it's not great.
Stay tuned for that, and for episode 50, where we will probably be discussing a lot of Hearthstone, and there's a possibility that episode 49 may be one of those fun, short episode listicle style things. We'll see.
Yeah, scheduling is hard, as we alluded to earlier, so we will... to be determined.
I've never thought about leaving an episode and just saying TBD, see you later. We'll probably be back.
Maybe. Who can say? This financial boondoggle is over. We're done. But seriously, though, give us a 5-star review on iTunes and Google Play.